I paid my guardian's bills for 7 years while my cousin did nothing. When I asked them to watch my son for one night, they laughed. "We're not your servants." So I cut them off. Days later, they were crying outside my house. I, 32M, never thought I'd be writing this, but here I am at 2 a.m., unable to sleep after what happened today. My hands are still shaking as I type this out, but I need to get this off my chest before I lose my mind completely. 7 years ago, my parents died in a car accident. I was 25, fresh out of college with a decent job, and suddenly responsible for figuring out what to do with my younger brother, who was still in high school. My aunt and uncle stepped up, offering to take him in. They seemed like saints at the time, and I was drowning in grief and logistics, so I gratefully accepted their help. What I didn't expect was the bill that came a month later. They sat me down and explained that raising a teenager was expensive, and while they were happy to help family, they needed financial support. The number they threw at me was staggering. Nearly $2,000 a month for his care, food, clothes, and school expenses. I was barely making $45,000 a year at the time, but I agreed. My brother needed stability, and I'd figure out how to make it work. I picked up a second job delivering food on weekends. I moved into a studio apartment that was basically a closet with a kitchenette. I ate ramen for dinner more nights than I care to admit. But every month, without fail, I sent them that check. When my brother needed new clothes for school, I sent extra. When he wanted to join the soccer team, I covered the fees. When he graduated and wanted to go to college, I took out loans to help with his tuition on top of what I was already paying them. Meanwhile, my cousin lived in the same house, rent-free. He was 2 years older than me, had a decent job, but contributed absolutely nothing to the household expenses. When I asked my aunt about it once, she brushed it off, saying he was saving up for his future and that family should help family. Apparently, that logic only applied to me. The years blurred together. I got promoted, started making better money, but the payments continued. My aunt would call with updates about my brother, always ending with subtle hints about rising costs or unexpected expenses. I never questioned it because I trusted them, and my brother seemed happy and well cared for. When my brother turned 18 and moved out for college, I assumed the payments would stop. Instead, my aunt called to explain that they had gotten used to the extra income and had made financial decisions based on it. Could I continue helping for just a little while longer until they adjusted? Like an idiot, I agreed to gradually reduce the payments over 6 months. Those 6 months turned into 2 more years. Every time I tried to stop, there was some crisis. My uncle's car broke down. The roof needed repairs. Medical bills from my aunt's surgery. I was trapped in a cycle of guilt and obligation, sending them money while they lived comfortably, and my cousin continued to freeload. Fast forward to 3 months ago. I got married to an amazing woman who came with a 6-year-old son from her previous relationship. The kid is great, calls me dad, and I love him like he's my own blood. My wife had been patient about the money I was sending to my aunt and uncle, but she finally sat me down and asked when it would end. That conversation was the wake-up call I needed. I decided to stop the payments. I called my aunt and explained that I was starting my own family now and needed to focus on my responsibilities at home. She wasn't happy, but she seemed to accept it. I thought that was the end of it. 2 weeks ago, my wife had a work emergency. She's a nurse, and they needed her to cover a night shift at the hospital. It was last minute, and our usual babysitter was out of town. I called my aunt, explaining the situation and asking if they could watch my stepson for one night. Just one night. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then my aunt started laughing. Not a pleasant laugh, but something cold and bitter. She told me they weren't my servants, that I couldn't just call them whenever I needed something after cutting them off financially. My uncle got on the phone and echoed the sentiment, adding that they had raised my brother out of the goodness of their hearts and didn't owe me any favors. I hung up, furious but not entirely surprised. I called in sick to work so my wife could go to her shift. But something had shifted in me during that phone call. The years of resentment I had buried came flooding back, and I started doing math. $2,000 a month for 7 years. That's $168,000. Plus all the extras for clothes, activities, and college help. I had paid them nearly $200,000 over the years. For context, I looked up the average cost of raising a teenager, and even in our high-cost area, it was nowhere near what I had been paying them. I started digging deeper. I called my brother, who's now 22 and living on his own. We had a long conversation about his time with our aunt and uncle. What he told me made my blood boil. They had been telling him that the money I sent barely covered his expenses and that they were making huge sacrifices to care for him. Meanwhile, they had renovated their kitchen, bought a new car, and taken multiple vacations during those 7 years. My brother also mentioned something that hit me like a truck. During his senior year of high school, he had overheard my aunt and uncle talking about how convenient it was that I was so guilt-ridden and easy to manipulate. They had been laughing about it, calling me their personal ATM. I spent the next week gathering every bank statement, every canceled check, every record of payment I had made to them. The total was even higher than I had calculated, $247,000 over 7 years. $250,000. Then I did something I probably should have done years ago. I hired a lawyer. My lawyer reviewed everything and was amazed at the paper trail I had maintained. He explained that while I had voluntarily made these payments, the fact that they had misrepresented the costs and manipulated me into continuing payments after my brother was no longer their dependent could constitute fraud. He suggested we send them a formal demand letter requesting reimbursement for the excess payments. The letter was delivered last Monday. It outlined exactly how much I had paid them, what the actual costs of caring for my brother should have been, and demanded repayment of $150,000, the amount we calculated they had taken beyond reasonable expenses. I didn't hear anything for 3 days. Then yesterday happened. I was working from home when I heard shouting outside. I looked out the window and saw my aunt, uncle, and cousin standing on my front lawn. My aunt was crying, my uncle was red-faced and gesturing wildly, and my cousin looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. I didn't go outside immediately. Instead, I called my lawyer and put him on speakerphone so he could hear whatever was about to happen. Then I grabbed my phone to record and stepped onto my porch. The scene that unfolded was something I'll never forget. My aunt immediately started sobbing, talking about how families should stick together and how hurt she was that I would threaten them with legal action. My uncle was angrier, demanding to know how I could be so ungrateful after everything they had done for me and my brother. But it was my cousin who really set me off. He had the audacity to tell me that I was being selfish, that I had plenty of money and should be happy to help family. This from the guy who had lived rent-free in his parents' house for over a decade, while I worked 2 jobs to pay his parents' bills. I let them talk for about 10 minutes, recording everything. Then I asked them a simple question. If they had been struggling so much financially, why hadn't my cousin contributed anything to the household expenses during all those years? The silence was deafening. My cousin started stammering about how he was saving money and how it was different for him. My aunt tried to change the subject back to family loyalty and forgiveness. That's when I told them exactly what I thought of their version of family loyalty. I explained that real family doesn't manipulate and lie to each other for money. Real family doesn't laugh about taking advantage of someone's grief and guilt. Real family doesn't refuse to help with one night of babysitting after receiving nearly $250,000 over 7 years. My uncle tried to interrupt, claiming they had never received that much money from me. I pulled out my phone and started reading the bank transfer amounts and dates. Month after month, year after year. His face went pale as the numbers added up. Then I told them about my conversation with my brother, about what he had overheard them saying about me being their personal ATM. My aunt's crying intensified, but now it seemed more like panic than sadness. I gave them a choice. They could work out a payment plan with my lawyer to return the excess money they had taken from me, or we could let a judge decide what constituted fraud and what the appropriate penalties should be. I told them they had 48 hours to decide. They left without another word, my cousin practically dragging his parents away from my house. This morning, my lawyer received a call from a lawyer representing my aunt and uncle. They want to negotiate a settlement. Apparently, the reality of potentially facing fraud charges has made them reconsider their position. I'm not sure what's going to happen next. Part of me wants to push for the full amount plus interest and legal fees. Another part of me just wants this nightmare to be over so I can focus on my new family. My wife has been incredibly supportive through all of this. She's the one who pointed out that my aunt and uncle's refusal to help with one night of babysitting was probably the best thing that could have happened to me. It finally opened my eyes to how one-sided this relationship had always been. My brother called me yesterday after my aunt apparently reached out to him, hoping he would intercede on their behalf. He told her exactly what he thought of how they had treated me, and made it clear he wouldn't be helping them manipulate me anymore. The hardest part of all this is realizing how naive I was for so many years. I genuinely believed they were struggling and that I was helping family in need. The thought that they were laughing about my generosity behind my back makes me sick to my stomach. But I'm also angry at myself for letting it go on for so long. There were signs I ignored, red flags I dismissed, because I wanted to believe the best of people who had stepped up when my parents died. Update 1. It's been a week since I posted this, and I wanted to update everyone on what's happened since then. The response to my original post was overwhelming, and reading all your comments helped me realize I wasn't crazy for feeling betrayed and angry. My lawyer met with their lawyer yesterday, and the negotiation was apparently intense. They initially offered to pay back $50,000, claiming that was all they could afford and that the rest of the money had been legitimately spent on my brother's care. My lawyer came prepared. He had calculated not just the excess payments, but also the interest that money would have earned if I had invested it instead of giving it to them. He also pointed out that their refusal to provide detailed accounting of how the money was spent suggested they knew they couldn't justify the amounts. The turning point came when my lawyer mentioned that we had been in contact with my brother and that he was prepared to testify about what he had witnessed and overheard during his time in their home. Apparently, their lawyer's demeanor changed significantly after that. They've now agreed to pay back $125,000 over the next 3 years. It's not the full amount I wanted, but my lawyer advised me that it was a reasonable settlement that avoided the uncertainty and expense of going to court. The payment plan starts next month with $3,500 monthly payments. Ironically, that's more than I was sending them during the peak years of supporting my brother. There's also a clause in the settlement that they cannot contact me or my family directly. All communication has to go through lawyers. I'm honestly relieved about this part because I don't think I could handle another confrontation like the one on my lawn. My cousin apparently moved out of their house this week. My brother heard through mutual family friends that my aunt and uncle told him he needed to start contributing to household expenses or find his own place. Guess the gravy train is finally over for everyone. Update 2. Another month has passed, and I received the first payment from my aunt and uncle yesterday. $3,500, exactly as agreed. My lawyer confirmed the payment and said everything was proceeding according to the settlement terms. But that's not the most significant thing that's happened. Last week, I got a call from my brother that changed everything. He had been going through some of his old things that were still stored at our aunt and uncle's house, and he found something disturbing. Hidden in a box of his school papers was a folder containing copies of bank statements and financial documents that belonged to my aunt and uncle. Apparently, my brother had accidentally grabbed this folder years ago when cleaning out a drawer, and it had been mixed in with his school stuff ever since. When he looked through it last week, he discovered something that made him immediately call me. The documents showed that during the years I was sending them money, my aunt and uncle had been depositing my payments into a separate savings account. They weren't using the money for my brother's day-to-day expenses at all. They were using their own money for his care and treating my payments like a bonus income stream. Even more shocking was a handwritten note in my aunt's writing that outlined their plan. It detailed how they would gradually increase the amount they asked from me, how they would create financial emergencies to justify extra payments, and how they would keep me sending money even after my brother turned 18. My brother was horrified. He brought the documents to me immediately, and we spent hours going through everything. The level of premeditation was staggering. This wasn't just taking advantage of my generosity. It was a calculated, long-term scheme to defraud me. I called my lawyer immediately. After reviewing the documents, he said this evidence completely changed the situation. What we had previously treated as a civil matter involving excess payments could now potentially be prosecuted as criminal fraud. The handwritten plan, in particular, showed clear intent to deceive and defraud. My lawyer said this was the kind of evidence that prosecutors dream of in fraud cases. I had a decision to make. I could stick with the civil settlement we had already agreed to, or I could take this new evidence to the district attorney's office and pursue criminal charges. I spent 3 sleepless nights thinking about it. My wife and I talked for hours about what the right thing to do was. On one hand, they were family, and criminal charges could result in jail time. On the other hand, they had systematically stolen from me for years while laughing about it behind my back. The deciding factor was something my brother said. He pointed out that if they had done this to me, they might do it to someone else. What if they found another vulnerable family member to manipulate? What if they were already working on someone else? Yesterday, I went to the district attorney's office with my lawyer and turned over all the evidence. The prosecutor who reviewed the case said it was one of the clearest examples of long-term fraud she had seen. She said they would be opening a criminal investigation immediately. I also learned something that made me feel less guilty about my decision. Apparently, this isn't the first time my aunt and uncle have been investigated for financial impropriety. 10 years ago, there was an investigation into their handling of funds for a local charity they were involved with, but charges were never filed due to lack of evidence. The civil settlement is now on hold pending the criminal investigation. If they're convicted, I'll likely recover much more money than the settlement would have provided. Plus, they'll face the consequences they deserve for what they did. My aunt called me yesterday, crying and begging me to reconsider. She claimed the handwritten plan was just her thinking out loud and didn't represent their actual intentions. I referred her to my lawyer and hung up. I know some people might think I'm going too far, but I keep coming back to that moment when they laughed at me for asking them to watch my stepson for one night. After everything I had done for them, after all the money I had sent, they couldn't be bothered to help me with one simple favor. That moment showed me exactly what I meant to them, nothing more than a source of easy money. Well, the easy money is gone, and now they're going to face the consequences of their greed. I'll update again once I know more about the criminal case, but for now, I'm focusing on my family and trying to move forward. My stepson asked me yesterday why I seemed happier lately, and I realized he was right. For the first time in 7 years, I feel like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. The money was never really about the money. It was about the betrayal, the manipulation, and the complete lack of respect they showed me. Now, finally, there might be some justice.